Hi, guys. You know what? Today is January 19 and it's Martin Luther King Day. And to commemorate and pay tribute to this great man of faith and this great leader, I wanted to share with you and give you a free chapter from my book, The Happy Entrepreneur. And I'm going to share with you chapter 18. And after I read it, I think you'll know why I'm sharing this with you on Martin Luther King Day. All right. So chapter 18, it's just a short chapter. I want to share it with you and read it to you. Okay. The title of the chapter is Empty. Eddie was starting to have palpitations again, anticipating his next airplane ride. But he decided to focus his mind on the solo time he would be able to have with his mentor. He and Tim hardly had any time to talk to each other during the event in Davao. And Eddie had big questions swirling inside his head that he couldn't wait to ask his kuya Tim, who was busy making a stream of calls while they waited for their boarding to start. Thankfully, their Cebu Pacific flight was leaving on time. Sorry, I had to take so many calls, Eddie. We're looking at buying a few competitors. It's okay, Kuya Tim. I think they're boarding already. We can talk on the flight naman, di ba? Eddie and Tim buckled into their seats and prayed for a safe flight. Tim texted his wife that they had boarded already. Eddie yawned, took a deep breath, and waited for Tim to finish responding to a text from his wife. So, just to give you context and a background into this chapter, if you haven't read the Happy Entrepreneur yet, this is about um, Eddie, who is a struggling entrepreneur, young entrepreneur who's at the end of his rope, and he starts panicking. He starts thinking of even ending his life. But then he meets Kuya Tim, who is a wonderful guy. He's a successful entrepreneur, billionaire, who God speaks to, and in his heart, he wants to mentor Eddie. And this is from chapter 18, as I mentioned, almost in the middle of the book, wherein on these flights and these trips that they take, Kuya Tim usually, speaks life to Eddie and mentors him. So they're about to take a flight back from Davao after a Go Negosyo event, and they're flying back to Manila. All right. So that's where chapter 8 leads us to. All right. So let me continue. Okay. So Eddie and Tim buckled into their seats and prayed for a safe flight. Tim texted his wife what they had that they had boarded already. Eddie yawned, took a deep breath, and waited for Tim to finish responding to a text from his wife. Okay, I think I read that already. But here we go. Okay. While waiting, Eddie read a PM on Viber from his auntie or tita. Eddie, how are you na? We are all thinking of you, anak. Always remember that we're just a call away, okay? We love you. See you soon. Eddie closed his eyes and smiled. Thank you, auntie, he whispered. He then waited for the onboard Bring Me games to finish before he started talking to Tim. But Tim was on his smartphone reading something. He turned to Eddie. I'm just finishing reading my devotion for the day. Actually, why don't I read part of this to you? Short lang naman eh. This is a paragraph from Martin Luther King Jr.'s piece in the His Promises devotions. The title of the devotion is I Will Uphold You. And it goes, the words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right. But now I am afraid, writes Dr. King. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. So Dr. King says that. So Dr. King says that after that prayer, he experienced the presence of the divine and a voice telling him to stand up for righteousness, stand up for truth, and God will be at your side forever. Eddie was nodding his head and felt like a child being read a story by his father. And then what happened po? He asked Timmy. Well, Dr. King says that a few nights later, their house was actually bombed. But even through that disaster, he was calm. Dr. King says here, my experience with God has given me a new strength and trust. He knew that God would be able to give him the strength to face the storms of life. Dr. King's devotion ends with Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10. And this is actually one of my most favorite Bible verses also. It says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Wow. Actually, sir, it's just right. Tama-tama, Eddie responded. I was going to ask, how do you handle fear? Sometimes I feel like I'm paralyzed and I have these anxiety attacks about decisions that I need to make. And then I have all these problems. I mean, yeah, challenges in my life. It's hard to move forward and do business with all these fears and worries. Eddie knew that his fears of failure, of being rejected, of not being good enough was limiting himself and the business. Eddie, Tim said, my mentors used to tell me that being courageous is not having the absence of fear, but stepping up, doing what you have to do despite the presence of fear. And keeping God's promises in your heart also helps. So memorize scripture and repeat it to yourself. Aside from Isaiah 41:10, memorize also Joshua chapter 1 verse 9. It says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Eddie, I keep on giving you Bible verses, but I don't want to give you the impression that I'm holier than you or anyone. I'm human, just like you, just like the people on this plane. But one thing I realize is that God gave us the Bible for a reason and a purpose. It wasn't created in a void. It's not a work of fiction either. It was written to teach us about life, in order that we might have hope through the patience and encouragement which the scriptures give us. Tim was on a roll, reciting verses from memory and going into his impastor preacher mode, his voice increasing in volume, gaining the attention and, for some, irritation of seatmates. Eddie, remember Peter? Like when he stepped out of the boat to walk on water, his eyes were fixed on Jesus. But as soon as he let the distractions, the winds and the waves, you know, get him to take his eyes off Jesus, he began to sink. And fear weighed down his heart and he sank. Peter panicked and would have drowned if not for the mercy of Jesus. Do you remember Daniel from your Sunday school lessons? It's the same thing. He didn't let fear of the lions get to him. And I'm sure you remember Abednego and his friends, Shadrach and Meshach. They were thrown into the furnace and they had faith that their God would save them. And in case his will was to allow the flames to kill them, they said, it's okay, even if God decided not to see them through. They all had their eyes fixed on the Lord. So when you look at yourself instead of God, then you'll sink. Before he left earth, Jesus promised that he will never leave us or forget us. Tim's voice was getting more and more impassioned, catching the attention and amusement of the flight attendant walking by, offering snacks and drinks for sale. Amen, sir. How about some chippy and C2 to go with your sermon, sir? Said the pretty mestiza flight attendant, teasing Tim while winking at Eddie. Please excuse me, Miss. Pasensya na iha. I'm just teaching my friend here some life lessons. And yes, Miss. At pabili nga ng chippy and C2, yung apple flavor. Ha? Ikaw, Eddie. Kuya, I'm okay po, kuya. Tim held a piece of chippy to his nose, closed his eyes, and inhaled. Wow, I haven't had this in a long time. Eddie, this chippy has been around since I was in grade school. I'd buy this during recess because I couldn't afford their Jack and Jill potato chips, which was about 1 peso more expensive. Ay, nako, memories. If there was one weakness that Tim had, it was in handling the relationship between his body weight and calories. Eddie was amused at his mentor's love affair with junk food. Tim became conscious and offered his mentee some chips. Thank you, po. Eddie took a few pieces and waited for Tim to continue. Anywhere. Anyway, where was I? Oh, okay, yes. Eddie, you must get your theology right. If you already believe that God has good plans in store for your future and plans to give you hope, then you shouldn't be afraid. If you believe in God's promises, that all, not just some things, but all things, Eddie, work out for good. It works out for the good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Then, welcome to the family of the fearless. You've got to live your life pouring out everything you've got in everything you decide to do. Nothing half hearted. As my mentor Paul told me, you've got to die empty. Live life full and empty yourself of everything that you've received, multiplying it through other people, pouring yourself to bless others, just like what I'm doing with you, Tim, Eddie. So when it's your time to die, you've died empty. And I've decided that's how I want to die, Eddie. I want to die empty. No more dreams left to fulfill, no more businesses to put up, no more books to write, no more countries to travel to, no more people to help, no regrets. Tim paused to put another chip in his mouth and sip from his bottle of iced tea. By this time, his fellow passengers in front and behind him were all eavesdropping, waiting for what Tim would say next. So Tim, the impostor, wiped his lips and continued his sermon. Eddie, they say that 10 or 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the stuff you didn't do than by the ones you did. Wow. One of the men I look up to is Dr. Martin Luther King. Remember, he wrote the devotional we just read. I mean, you've heard of Dr. King, right? Eddie shook his head. Well, okay. He was an American minister and civil rights activist, Tim narrated. Dr. King fought for the rights of African Americans using non-violent resistance. It wasn't easy because the police were violent towards African Americans that time. Imagine if Martin Luther King decided to give up on his dream and give in to his fears. Where would the African Americans in America be today? And just like what happened to Dr. King, bombs did come along the way as he trusted God to fulfill his purpose. I mean, literally, his home was bombed. But like he said, his heart was calm. He didn't succumb to fear. And then, just a few weeks later, he was shot and killed by some scared person who feared change. But Dr. King's dream lived on, and he died empty. I believe God allowed Dr. King to die and be taken away because he had already accomplished his purpose and his dream. And there's no better way to go, Eddie, but to die empty. That's the goal. Don't leave any of your dreams unfulfilled. Die empty. Tim took a deep breath, looked around, and then whispered to his mentee, "That's why you cannot, should not, must not even think of killing yourself. You are full of potential, Eddie, full of successful businesses, full of dreams. Eddie, I'm already proud of you. You're going to be a blessing to others." Tim then leaned back into his seat and said in a louder voice, "So don't be afraid of failure or even success. Be brave and follow your dreams, Eddie. Be brave." Tim stopped himself as his voice became even louder and more impassioned. A quarter of the passengers near him were annoyed, a quarter inspired, a quarter amused, and a quarter intrigued with the conversation going on between him and Eddie. One elderly passenger sitting in the opposite row was fully entertained by the conversation, chuckling and saying to himself, "Hi, buhay." End of chapter 18. So I hope you enjoyed that, and you gotta know what happened in the next chapter, because that elderly gentleman that they were right there in the same plane with was none other than the owner of the plane of Cebu Pacific. So you gotta read this book and read the chapter. You gotta know what happens afterwards. So again, thank you. Um, 3,000. I don't know. We're at 3,900 something subscribers. I wish. Ina na nga ba? So shout out to the 3,605 subscribers that we now have. Thank you, everybody, for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, just subscribe. Click that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can get more inspiring videos about life, about love, inspiration, family, and faith, and excellence. So that's it for now. Happy Martin Luther King Day. God bless.